Andrey Rublev is one of the hardest hitters on the ATP Tour. At least YouTube seems to think so. And, well, listen to him. But here's the thing. Looks, or in this case, sounds, can be deceiving. Let's take a look at some of those same clips, but with the sound muted. As you can see, not only are these balls not struck that hard, some of them are slower than an average rally ball. In other words, he's not always hitting the ball hard when he grunts. Here's a fun little game. On which shots during this 30-ball rally does Rublev grunt? I'll give you a hint. Of the 14 ground strokes he hits, he grunts on 7 of them and doesn't grunt on 7 more. I don't know about you, but if I didn't know the answer already, there's no way I'd be able to figure this out. Anyway, while we're waiting for this to finish, let's get to the point that I'm trying to make with this video. That Andrey Rublev is a grinder, or a pusher, or a counterpuncher, or whatever you want to call it. Sure, he's capable of being aggressive, but that's basically a prerequisite for being top 20 in the world. And before we even get to the stats, I'm pretty sure this clip alone is already starting to prove my point. Alright, let's first take a look at his match stats from the 2020 Australian Open. And the way we're going to do that is by looking at his rally stats, which obviously doesn't include serves, so we can see how aggressive he's being. The way we're going to do that is by looking at the winners plus the induced errors and then plus the unforced errors, and that'll give us a good proxy for how aggressive he's being. Obviously, if you're playing like crap, then you could put up a bunch of unforced errors, but this is a pretty good representation. And so in 3 out of his 4 matches, his first round match against Christopher O'Connell, his third round match against David Goffin, and his fourth round match where he lost against Alexander Zverev, in all 3 of those matches, he had fewer combined winners, unforced errors, and induced errors, and in some cases by a large margin. Like for example, against David Goffin, who's typically known as a conservative baseliner, he had fewer of all 3 numbers here. Same thing goes for his match against the wildcard player and against Alexander Zverev. The only match in which he did have more against his opponent was against Yuichi Sugita, who's a very defensive player, and if you're not going for your shots against him, then I don't know what you're doing. Let's now move from single match stats over to more aggregated data, and we're going to do that by going over to tennisabstract.com. Just a reminder, I am not affiliated with them in any manner, I just really like the site. The first stat that I want to point out here for Andrey Rublev is point outcomes by rally length. Now, he's had 34 matches charted, which isn't a ton, but it's a reasonable sample size. But as you can see here, from 1 through 6 shots, he's basically winning at a 50% clip. But once you go to 7+ shots, he's winning at 55% for 7 through 9 and 54% for 10+. So 4 to 5% higher than normal once you get into these long rallies, which means that he's not really going for the kill shot early. Or if he is, then he's not very good at it. Obviously much more successful the longer the point goes. And not only that, but if you go ahead and take a look at the percentage of winners that he hits once the rally goes this long, when it's 7 through 9, he hits 18% winners, and I don't know if you can see this, maybe if you're on your phone you cannot, but the tour average is 19% for 7 through 9, and once it goes to 10+, he's at 16%, and the tour average is 18%, right? So he's hitting less winners than average, and yet still winning the point more often than not. For unforced errors, he is 17%, the tour average is 20%, and for unforced errors for 10+ balls, he's at 18%, and the tour average there is 20% as well. So again, 3% lower and 2% lower on unforced errors. So when he's winning these points, it's not like he's hitting winners at the end. He's just hitting fewer unforced errors and allowing his opponent to miss, as we'll see here. We'll take a look at the opponent's stats here. Obviously, the win percentage is going to be exactly mirrored. For winners, though, the opponents are hitting even fewer winners than Rublev was. This is 16 versus 19 on average and 15 versus 18 on average. Obviously, the tour average is not going to change whether it's the opponent or themselves. And for unforced errors, again, it was 20-20 on the average, and it's 22-23 for his opponents. So when these points go along, he's hitting fewer unforced errors, he's hitting fewer winners, his opponents are hitting fewer winners, but they're hitting a lot more unforced errors. So basically, he's just playing the long game, playing very conservative on these long points, and allowing his opponents to miss for him. The last way I'm going to show that Andrey Rublev is a mostly conservative player is by using rally aggression score, which is a stat made up by Jeff Sackman. It basically combines winners' unforced errors and shots that induce forced errors. It excludes serves, and basically he fiddled with the numbers so that they're a little bit less noisy. And 2 average is 0, so basically if you're above 0, then you're more aggressive than average. If you're lower than 0, then you're more conservative than average. So the actual site had rally aggression score all the way over in the rightmost column, so I copied and pasted the table onto a Google Sheet, so it's a bit easier to see. And if you take a look at these scores, the scores pretty much check out. You know, Karlovic, Isner, Ivanisevic, Raonic, Sampras, all these serve and volley players trying to get the point as quickly over as possible, and they're on the top. And if we flip the column, then you see all the most conservative players over on the other side, you know, Simone, Bruguera, Medvedev, Nadal, Chang, Hewitt, etc., etc. So the extreme players are pretty much where they're supposed to be, and even though there are a couple surprises on this list as far as the placement, that might just be a sign that we need to rethink the way we look at those players, just like I'm doing with Rublev right now. Speaking of which, let's find out where Rublev falls on this table. Just a reminder that this table only has players who have had 20 or more of their matches charted, so it's only 107 players. But yeah, we're down below Nishikori, down below Berdych, down below a lot of conservative players down here, and all the way at negative 36 we see Andrey Rublev, basically more conservative than Goffin, more conservative than Coric, than Tsitsipas, basically the same as Zverev. But, you know, on this list of 107 players, remember, he's very, very solidly on the conservative side of this list, which I think would surprise a lot of people, considering they hear his grunts. It seems like he's hitting as hard as he can every single time. But like I mentioned earlier, sounds can be deceiving, and he is definitely a conservative player. Just a quick addendum here. Obviously, I was looking at players' career numbers, but if you go look at the last 52 weeks of matches, then Rublev is actually at a negative 65 with a pretty decent sample size of 20 matches here, even more conservative than Djokovic and Nadal and Zverev over that time period, some other players who've had a lot of matches charted. So this goes to show that as he's had more success over the past 52 weeks, over the past year, he's actually gotten more conservative, which really kind of drives the point home. Thanks for watching. If you want more tennis stats and analysis and all that good stuff, make sure to appease the YouTube algorithm gods by liking, commenting, and subscribing.